The hum of the airport echoed with rolling suitcases, flight announcements, and the nervous chatter of travelers preparing for a long journey. Among the crowd was Martha Johnson, a 72-year-old black grandmother, her silver hair tucked neatly under a soft scarf. She wasn't flashy, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. Her worn brown handbag clutched her travel documents, and her kind eyes sparkled with warmth. This flight meant more to her than anyone around could imagine. After years of working double shifts as a school cafeteria cook, saving every dime, she was finally on her way to meet her newborn great-granddaughter in London. She had dreamed of this moment for months, to hold that tiny baby, to see her family's legacy continue. As Martha shuffled forward in the boarding line, she whispered a prayer. "Lord, please get me there safely." Behind her, strutting with the confidence of someone who believed the world owed her everything, was Vivian Blake. A wealthy socialite in her early 40s, Vivian wore a designer suit, diamond earrings, and heels that clicked like a metronome of arrogance. Her expensive perfume clouded the air, making people turn their heads, though not in admiration, but irritation. Vivian looked Martha up and down and smirked. "Ugh, why do they let people like this fly first class?" she muttered under her breath, though loud enough for Martha and others to hear. Martha gave her a polite smile, choosing not to respond. She had endured worse in her life. Once on board, Martha carefully found her seat, 3A, a window seat in the first-class cabin. She settled in slowly, smoothing her skirt and placing her handbag neatly on her lap. Seconds later, Vivian appeared beside her, eyes narrowing in horror. Her seat was 3B, right next to Martha. Vivian froze, her lips curling with disgust. "Excuse me, stewardess," she snapped, waving down the flight attendant as if she were calling over a maid. "There's been some kind of mistake. I'm supposed to be seated next to, well, someone else. Not her." She gestured toward Martha, as though pointing at a stain. The cabin grew uncomfortably quiet. Passengers nearby leaned in, sensing drama. Martha's cheeks burned, but she remained silent, her hands folded tightly on her lap. The young flight attendant, Emily, stepped forward with a professional smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this is your assigned seat." Vivian scoffed. No. You don't understand. I paid for first class. I don't sit next to people like her." Martha's eyes lowered. Her heart ached, not for herself, but for the ugliness of what she was hearing. She thought of her great-granddaughter, the world this little girl would grow up in, and for a moment doubt crept in. Would things ever change? Emily's cheeks flushed red with embarrassment. She was about to respond when suddenly, a deep voice echoed from the aisle. "Is there a problem here?" The cabin fell into silence. Standing tall, dressed in crisp navy blue, was Captain Daniel Harris, the pilot himself. His eyes were sharp, his jaw set. He had the presence of a man who commanded respect. Vivian straightened her posture, smirking. "Yes, there's a problem. I'm being forced to sit next to her. It's unacceptable." The captain's gaze shifted from Vivian's sneering face to Martha's humble, composed figure. For a long moment, he said nothing, the tension thick in the air. Finally, he spoke, his words calm, but edged with steel. "Ma'am," he said to Vivian, "I think it's best you take your seat. Because if there's anyone on this plane who doesn't belong, it's not her." A ripple of gasps swept through the cabin. Martha's eyes widened, and for the first time, a small smile touched her lips. The real story was only just beginning. "Before I continue, what would you do if you saw someone humiliated like this on a plane? Drop your answer in the comments. I'll be reading them all. And if you believe dignity matters more than money, make sure to hit that like button right now." Vivian's face flushed crimson. She wasn't used to being spoken to that way, especially not in front of an audience. Her wealth, her connections, her polished life had always shielded her from accountability. But here, at 35,000 feet, in the confined world of a cabin, she suddenly wasn't untouchable. She forced a laugh, dripping with condescension. "Captain, with all due respect, I don't think you understand. I don't sit next to cleaning ladies. Look at her. She doesn't belong here. She should be in coach. Or better yet, not on this flight at all." Gasps rippled again. A businessman across the aisle muttered, "Unbelievable." A mother clutching her toddler shook her head in disgust. Martha sat motionless, her hands folded, her dignity intact. She didn't need to defend herself. The world was already judging Vivian. The captain's eyes narrowed. His voice grew firmer, but not louder. Commanders didn't need to shout. "Ma'am, let me tell you something. Seats in this cabin aren't given because of the color of someone's skin or the size of their wallet. They're earned. paid for, and respected. This woman, he gestured to Martha, has every right to be here. And if you can't handle that, I'll be more than happy to arrange another seat for you. In the cargo hold, the passengers chuckled, some even clapping softly. Vivian's jaw dropped. Excuse me? Do you know who I am? The captain leaned closer, his tone razor-sharp. I don't care who you are. What I care about is keeping this plane safe, and right now, you're a disruption. Vivian fumed, but with the weight of dozens of eyes on her, she had no choice but to sit down. She crossed her arms tightly, glaring at Martha as if her very existence was a personal insult. Martha turned her gaze out the window. She whispered a quiet prayer again, not for herself, but for Vivian. Lord, soften her heart. She doesn't even know what she's doing. As the plane took off, silence lingered. The hum of the engines filled the air, but beneath it was an unspoken tension. Vivian sat stiff as a board, sighing dramatically every few minutes, making sure everyone knew she was unhappy. Finally, an hour into the flight, the turbulence began, not outside but inside. Vivian leaned toward Martha, her voice a hiss. You think you won something, don't you? Sitting here, soaking up all this pity. Don't fool yourself. People like me will always be above people like you. Martha turned slowly, her expression calm, unshaken. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't match Vivian's venom. Instead, she asked one question. Above me in what way? Vivian blinked, thrown off by the gentle response. In every way. Money, power, class, everything that matters. Martha's eyes softened. Funny, because the things that matter most can't be bought. The words hit Vivian harder than she wanted to admit. For a fleeting second, her confident mask cracked, but she quickly forced it back into place. Moments later, Emily the flight attendant passed by with the meal service. She smiled warmly at Martha. Chicken or pasta tonight, ma'am? Martha smiled back. Chicken, please. Thank you. When Emily turned to Vivian, her tone remained professional, but her warmth was noticeably cooler. And for you, ma'am? Vivian snapped, pasta. And make it quick. Emily gave a curt nod and moved on. It was subtle, but Vivian noticed. The respect she once demanded so easily was slipping away. People weren't impressed by her wealth anymore. They were disgusted by her arrogance. As Martha quietly enjoyed her meal, passengers began engaging her in conversation. The businessman asked about her travels. The young mother complimented her scarf. Even the child peeked over the seat to wave at her. It was as if the entire cabin recognized her dignity, while isolating Vivian in her own bitterness. And then, something happened that none of them expected. Halfway through the flight, as the cabin lights dimmed, a sudden announcement came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've got a bit of turbulence ahead, so please fasten your seatbelts. The plane shuddered, dipping slightly before stabilizing again. Nervous murmurs filled the cabin. Martha calmly fastened her belt and closed her eyes in prayer. Vivian, however, clutched her armrests in terror. Oh my God, we're going to crash. I can't do this, she shrieked, her face pale. Passengers turned to stare, but no one rushed to comfort her. No one, except Martha. With steady hands, Martha reached over and placed her palm gently on Vivian's trembling one. You're going to be fine, baby. Just breathe. God's got us. Vivian froze. For the first time, she looked directly into Martha's eyes, not with disgust, but with raw, unfiltered fear. And what she saw wasn't judgment. It wasn't anger. It was kindness. Kindness she didn't deserve. Vivian's throat tightened. She didn't pull her hand away. For the next 10 minutes, as the plane rocked gently through turbulence, she sat there, holding the hand of the woman she had mocked. By the time the skies cleared, something inside her had begun to shift. But that shift was only the beginning. Quick question for you watching right now. Do you believe people can truly change, even if they've been cruel their whole life? Let me know in the comments. I'll pin the best responses. And if you're still here, you clearly love stories with heart. So make sure you subscribe for more. The turbulence finally eased, and the passengers slowly relaxed. The overhead lights dimmed into a soft glow, and the gentle hum of the engines returned to its usual rhythm. Vivian still hadn't let go of Martha's hand. It was as if some invisible tether had been tied in that moment of fear. She quickly realized what she was doing and snatched her hand back, straightening in her seat. But something about her expression had changed. Her sharp, haughty mask wasn't quite as solid anymore. Martha, ever composed, gave her a small, knowing smile. See, we made it through. Just like life. Storms don't last forever. Vivian didn't reply, but she didn't roll her eyes either. She simply turned her gaze toward the window, watching the endless sea of clouds illuminated by the moonlight. For the first time on the flight, she was quiet. Across the cabin, passengers whispered about what had just unfolded. Can you believe that? She held the hand of the very woman she insulted. I hope she's rethinking her choices. But the real twist was yet to come. About an hour later, the intercom buzzed again. The captain's voice carried a warmth that immediately caught everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to share something special tonight. You see, not every passenger who flies with us is just another traveler. Sometimes, we have the honor of carrying someone remarkable. Someone whose story deserves to be told. The cabin quieted instantly. Heads turned. The captain continued. Sitting among you is a woman who many of you may have noticed. She's kind. She's graceful. She carries herself with dignity. But what most don't know is that she's more than that. She is a pioneer. She is someone who's dedicated her life to making the world better. Vivian stiffened. Her heart raced as her eyes darted toward Martha. Could he be talking about her? The captain's voice grew stronger. Tonight, on this very flight, we are joined by none other than Dr. Martha Johnson, one of the first black female professors of law in her state, a civil rights advocate, and a woman who has personally funded scholarships for over 200 underprivileged students. Gasps filled the cabin. Applause erupted spontaneously. Some people stood, craning their necks to see the elderly woman who had sat quietly all this time. Martha lowered her eyes humbly, a faint smile on her lips. Vivian's jaw fell open. She turned toward Martha in disbelief. This woman, this nobody she had dismissed as a cleaning lady, was a professor? A philanthropist? A hero? The captain wasn't finished. And I'll add this, Dr. Johnson isn't just a passenger. She's also a friend, a mentor. She taught me, many years ago, when I was just a young man struggling to believe in myself. Without her guidance, I wouldn't be the pilot flying this plane today. The entire cabin exploded into applause, louder this time. Some even whistled, some shouted bravo. Martha chuckled softly, shaking her head. She hadn't expected this. She had simply boarded her flight, as she always did, quietly and humbly. Vivian felt her world shatter. Every arrogant word she had spat earlier now echoed back at her like poison. You're a doctor? A professor? She stammered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Martha turned her kind eyes toward her. Yes, baby. But more importantly, I'm just a child of God. Same as you. Vivian's lips quivered. For once, she had nothing to say. The passengers around them kept clapping, smiling at Martha, glaring occasionally at Vivian. The balance of respect in that cabin had completely shifted. Vivian, once the self-proclaimed queen of status, now sat in silence, dwarfed by the greatness of the woman she had ridiculed. And yet, the story wasn't over. Because Martha wasn't finished teaching lessons. If you've been watching this far, I've got a challenge for you. Think of someone in your life who deserves gratitude, but maybe you've never said it. Pause and drop their name in the comments. Let's make this section of the internet a place of honor, not hate. The applause eventually faded, though the warmth it left behind lingered in the air. Passengers stole admiring glances at Martha, and many whispered to one another about how lucky they felt to have shared this flight with her. Vivian, meanwhile, sat frozen in her seat. Her cheeks burned with humiliation, but beneath that shame was something else, something she wasn't used to feeling. Admiration. For the rest of the flight, she said little. Occasionally, she peeked sideways at Martha, who simply rested peacefully, her hands folded in her lap, a serene smile on her face. By the time the plane began its descent, Vivian's mind was spinning. How could I have been so cruel? So blind? The wheels screeched against the runway, and the plane rolled to a steady stop at the gate. Passengers began to gather their things, chatter buzzing through the cabin. But before anyone could leave, the captain's voice returned one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying with us tonight. As you disembark, I hope you'll remember not just your destination, but also the journey and the people who made it meaningful. Kindness costs nothing, but its reward is priceless. The words hung in the air like scripture. As passengers filed out, many stopped to shake Martha's hand, some even hugging her. Thank you for what you've done. You're an inspiration. God bless you. Martha accepted each with grace, her heart full. Then it was Vivian's turn. She clutched her designer handbag, her face flushed, eyes watery. For once, the proud, untouchable heiress looked small. Martha. She faltered, her voice cracking. I'm so sorry. I judged you. I disrespected you. I treated you like you were nothing, when you're everything I should aspire to be. Martha placed a gentle hand on Vivian's shoulder. Child, apology accepted. But remember, respect isn't about titles, money, or looks. It's about how you treat the soul sitting next to you, no matter who they are. Vivian nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. You've taught me more in these few hours than I've learned in years. Martha smiled softly. Then don't waste the lesson. Live it. The terminal doors opened, and the crowd dispersed. Martha walked slowly, her cane tapping against the polished floor, her dignity untouched. Behind her, Vivian followed, not out of obligation, but out of respect. The girl who once sneered at sitting beside a black grandmother now walked 2 steps behind her, as if humbled in the presence of quiet greatness. Passengers who had witnessed everything exchanged knowing glances. Some even pulled out their phones, murmuring about how they'd never forget this flight. Because sometimes the most important journeys aren't about miles traveled, but hearts changed. In a world obsessed with wealth, beauty, and power, it was an elderly black grandmother, armed with nothing but dignity and grace, who stole the show. Vivian boarded that flight, believing she was above everyone else. But by the time the wheels touched the ground, it was clear. Her world would never be the same. And maybe, just maybe, neither will ours. If you believe respect should be earned by character, not by skin color, money, or status, then hit that like button. And if you love your parents, make sure to subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments, which country and city are you watching from? Let's see how far this story travels.